The AYN Thor is capable of emulating an absolute plethora of systems. However, there's one system or systems that always seem to get cast aside. So let's take a look at the easiest way to get the AYN Thor to run arcade games. So here I am on my AYN Thor. We're just going to be using the top screen for this because the bottom screen isn't really necessary. So the way we're going to emulate our arcade games is through RetroArch. However, if you've looked at the core list for RetroArch, you'll notice that when it comes to arcade, there is a ton, and it can be very complicated and it can go wrong very quickly if you don't do it properly. So we're going to look at the easiest way. So we're going to go to our RetroArch. Obviously, you can do this on your front end of choice. Once I've done the initial setup, I'll be looking at it through Cocoon. So here we are in our RetroArch. If you've not used RetroArch before, then please do check out my RetroArch guides, which I'll link in the description below. So RetroArch is a multi-system emulator, and it works by you have cores, and they're essentially mini versions of the emulators which sit inside RetroArch. So we're going to go to our online updater. We're going to go to our core downloader. Now I've already downloaded this, but I'll just quickly talk through why there's so many. So if we look here at the top, we've got all these arcade ones. We've got Dice, we've got the FB Alphas, we've got MAME. MAME might be something you've heard of. The one we're going to be focusing on, you can see there, it's got that little hash next to it, is Final Burn Neo. And there's a very good reason for this. So you can see just how many versions of a MAME we've got there. Six different versions of MAME. The way arcade emulation works in this sense. So for Final Burn Neo, or FBNeo, as it can also be called, that focuses on playability, and it's a little bit more generous when it comes to emulation. MAME is focused primarily on accuracy. However, you have to have specific versions of specific ROMs, and if something's the tiniest little bit incompatible, you're going to get errors, you're going to get black screens, and it can be an absolute nightmare. So when it comes to arcade emulation, you want to focus on Final Burn Neo or FBNeo. There are actually dedicated ROM packs out there specifically for FBNeo. I can't link them. However, you've got the internet. They're not too difficult to find. So all you need to do is download that core. I've already downloaded it, so it's just going to re-download it. And then we're going to quit out. I'm going to boot up Cocoon, and I'm going to show you how to set up arcade emulators in Cocoon. So just before we dive into Cocoon, I want to show you where I've placed my FBNeo ROMs, because I use the ESDE emulation folder layout, which I advise most people do, especially if you're using Cocoon or ESU, or a lot of front ends do tend to tailor their scanning to the ESDE format. So for my ROMs folder, all I've done is I've put them in the arcade folder. There it is. Got absolutely tons here. Now, you might notice that some of these have quite weird names, and a lot of them is abbreviated. The scanners and the scrapers should still work fine. This is just the way that it's been ripped, and it's based off a lot of the MAME stuff. I don't really know why, but even when games say things like BB Man W, Bomberman, I've no idea what that could be. I'm sure we'll find out. We don't have to focus on properly renaming all your ROMs. So you'll also notice if you've used the ESDE that there is other arcade system folders in here. So we've got CPS1, which is the Capcom Play System, I think it's called. Focuses primarily around Capcom games, funnily enough. We've also got FBNeo has its own folder. So if you're using a system, for example, if you're using ESDE, you can just pop them in here, and there's no real difference, because with something like Cocoon, we're going to point it at the folder anyway and then tell the system which emulator to use. There's also some different MAME folders, or just the one MAME folder, apologies, where you'd put all your MAME ROMs. However, like I said earlier, because of the amount of different variables that can happen with regards to MAME ROM sets, I'd advise arcade or FBNeo. But for this example, we're just going to stick with arcade. So let's boot into Cocoon. So here we go. I've got my nice Cocoon using the PB mini icons, which I do love. So I've got my arcade system here. you can see I've got all my games like were in the folder. So to set this up, if you've not added a new system to Cocoon on top of the initial scan, all you need to do is if you go to library and data, and then if you scroll down where it says platforms, you can see you can press Y or you can click this little plus button. But you can see here we've got the MAME and the Final Burn Neo. So we're only concerned about the Final Burn Neo. I believe the only difference for Cocoon is the players that it gives you. I know that there is going to be some heavy UI and UX overhauls in the next release of Cocoon, so this might change. But for now, Final Burn Neo, or if it ever gets renamed to FBNeo. So you can add that. And then once it's added, you can set your default emulator. So you can see here, it gives you the option for the FB Alpha 2012. We're just going to be focusing on making sure that the default emulator is FBNeo. And then what I've done here is by default, if I just get rid of those, you can add multiple ROM paths, which is probably one of my favorite features of Cocoon. So I'm just going to go back and re-add that folder that I just deleted, just to show you how easy it is. So what was the arcade folder that I added? So add arcade, we'll use that folder. Oh no, I didn't need the FBNeo one, so I will just delete that actually. But that's how you'd add a new folder if you wanted multiple ROM paths. So make sure you press Y or the little confirm tick at the top, otherwise it won't save. And once you've done that, if you go to rescan games, it will rescan any systems that you add. So if you've not already added arcade, that's how you do it. So now all your games will pull through. So mine are already scraped. If you want to know how to scrape them, it's the same way you'd scrape any other system in Cocoon. You just go to the scrape and then you can scrape the retro achievements, scrape the metadata, scrape the artwork, you can set your sources, all this stuff I've covered in my Cocoon guides before. So let's have a look at a Final Burn Neo. So I can pick a random game. We could find whatever that BB man was. So some of them haven't been able to scrape all of the artwork, but you can see that I've got the heroes and the logos, but I haven't got the actual box art. So obviously a lot of these are being arcade games. They now had proper box art releases, and it's all dependent on Screen Scraper or Steam Grid DB, what systems they've been able to, what people have uploaded essentially. I do know that Cocoon have just announced that they'll be adding the launch box scraper to the next version, which hopefully should help cover some of these missing gaps. So, have we got anything for BB Man? Big Bucks Trivia Quest? Could be. Buster Brothers? Batman? It could have even been Batman. Atomic Punk 2, although that's like Bomberman to me. So let's just, enough of me rambling, let's play some Bomb Jack. So you can see I've pressed it and it's booted straight in. And then all you need to do, so control-wise, you can press the start button, it'll do some your usual RAM-ROM checks. You can see I'm pressing buttons here, and, oh, there we go. So I'm actually not very good at Bomb Jack, but we'll see how we get on. So yeah, it's Bomb Jack. If you ever played Bomb Jack, you collect the bombs, you dodge the skeletons and the weird little football things. To quit out, I just press start and select on RetroArch. And if I just check out Burger Time, one of my all-time favourite arcade games, even though I'm not really good at it, again, it's just booted straight into it without issue. Sometimes you do have to kind of press the select button. But you can see that it runs perfectly. And yeah, that was a terrible attempt. I apologise for that. So I'll just quit out of this. So yeah, that was just a very simple guide on how to get arcade games working on the AYN Thor. Like I said, you could use MAME, however, it's a lot more complicated due to the amount of variables. So if you do want to look at specific arcade emulation, I'd always advise, if you're a beginner, just look for FBNeo or Final Burn Neo ROM packs. They are out there. Like I said, I can't tell you exactly where, as they are copyrighted, but they are easy enough to find on the internet. And they do tend to come as a nice big pack. So you can also find there's lists that do have all those abbreviations, so you can make sure that you're getting the correct ROM files. As always, if you like this video, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. Tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.